wonderfully. I'm going to go ahead and we're going to move on to Alistair, and we're talking more about, going from building relationships to how to actually take care of your house, especially as a single person. So we're going to start by talking about the importance of regular maintenance activities that every homeowner should do to make sure that the little problems do not turn into bigger problems.
Thank you. I was trying to figure out why Laura wanted me to talk about single people and insurance today. I'm like, well, the policy doesn't change. It's still a home policy. So, like, rental car coverage for an auto is still the same if they're single or not. But then I was like, oh, I'm single, right? So I knew it. Now I see the underlying story. My sister lost her husband, self-inflicted, a couple years ago. And so, we moved her back home. My parents came out of retirement, and I'm big brother, so I get called to do a few things. So you realize some of that stuff. I'm divorced, and so my son, I remember he walked in the house one day, he says, "Dad, your house is clean like the Ten Brinks." I'm like, I know how to clean, I can cook, and so, but there's misconceptions, right? I thought Laura was going to pick on me for all these stereotypes, but she's proven wrong.
I might.
Right?
Talk's not over yet.
All right. My ex-wife calls me the best ex-husband ever because I go and help her do stuff, and I've watched my girlfriend pressure wash into the wind, and she doesn't like to be told how to do stuff. She wants to learn on her own. So I tell her after the fact that if you go downwind with the water, so I get it, right? And it's fun for me to come and talk about stuff. But when it comes to home insurance, most of the time I hear people say, I've been paying for this stuff for 30 years, never had a claim, sometimes it doesn't go the way people expect it to. So I like to talk about, like I mentioned when I first introduced myself, common sense and logic. And so a lot of that stuff will get you to the finish line. But we talk about regular maintenance. Sometimes it's just a stroll around your property. And I think about a home. Most of our claims happen from the top roofs or from water. Those are our two most popular claims, whether it's outside water or inside water. So, just a general inspection, using your eyes, walk around the house, look at the roof. Does it look like it's normal? Do all the shingles look like they're there? Is there siding missing, right? Is there siding moved? Is there an eave, a fascia, a soffit that's bumped up from something that goes bump in the night, right? Those can cause some problems. Outdoor plumbing. I just had a guy that bought a rental property, like an Airbnb from Chicago, never inspected the property. And after a month of owning the place, he called me, he says, "I think I've got mold." I said, "Oh no, what do you think it came from?" He's like, "I'm not sure, I'll send you some pictures." And he sends me a picture of an outdoor faucet, and it's a steel siding, like a barn dominium, and there's rust streaks for 3 feet each side where this thing's leaked for probably years, maybe months. And so I'm like, you probably need to disconnect. The hose was still connected, right? And it's January. I'm like, you probably should disconnect your hose in the wintertime. But that's assumptive, right? That people know they need to do that kind of thing. So outdoor plumbing. I learned last year mice can climb 3 stories up bricks. I know what bats look like when they go inside eaves. So for me, a lot of times outdoor, it's the grasses are knocked over in the fall. We're like, oh, I'll clean it up in the spring. The leaves kind of piled up along the corner of the house and the fence. I see that stuff as gateways to critters. And then once we come inside the house, that's where the fun starts. Drains. I've been inside houses that have been owned for years, and then people move, and then I'll help my buddies move in, and you realize that people don't move the bed away from the wall for 20 years and clean. And so sometimes it's the refrigerator, it's the stove, the dishwasher. To me, it's doing a little routine maintenance, hitting the vacuum cleaner around the appliances. That can cause some headaches. But furnaces especially that way, filters. To me, I say that's obvious stuff, but I rented for a while, and I was like, well, that's his problem. I'll just let them change the filter, right? Nothing happened after 3 years, but I wasn't very preventative in my last place. But we see most of our problems inside homes from clogged drains, from, you got a dog that you give a bath in the upstairs bathtub, and next thing you know, your living room's got rain coming down, and, maybe some Drano once in a while in the drains. Air conditioners on the outside, going back to outside. I hose my air conditioner fins out once in a while. Gutters, right? So, seeing some leaves sticking out. I didn't have gutters on a house I owned. added gutters, my basement flooded because the water came right down and it was right in one spot. And so, like sometimes you think you're doing the right thing, right? So making sure your gutters move water away from the home. So, but really, electrical outlets, like if you've got outlets that don't hold the plug, sometimes that's where we get some fires that start. So, but when we look at, like, I didn't say smoke detectors and carbon monoxide, right? People, like, I don't have very many fires. It's water. It's the main thing, and it comes from toilets that overflow because you didn't, check. Like I plunge my toilets and throw some bleach down, CLR type stuff, but sump pumps, checking to make sure that stuff works. So. It's like I'll send you guys a roadmap if you email me. I'll send you a little animated roadmap of what I do on a Saturday morning. So it doesn't take much. So.
Well, and that's a good point because, so many of these things that might be obvious to one person are not necessarily obvious to somebody else. We have had the outdoor faucet freeze, back up, filled our basement with water. We've had sump pump issues. I've got a great video of Mark being sprayed and going crazy from our sump pump. That was fun. Our kids had a good laugh over that. But there are so many things, and as we get older, and especially so many of the clients that I work with, if you've been in a house for many years, I have homes that are actually immaculate everywhere else, but then something gets moved in a storage room and you find a problem that has probably been there for years, but it was behind a set of shelves and you never would have seen it. Or for that matter, simply as people spend more time on their main floor and less time in the upstairs or in the basements, that there are things that start to progress and get worse, and they just don't have a reason to go down there. And so it's important to have a set of outside eyes. And often, especially with the outside stuff, it might not be safe necessarily for the homeowner themselves to do these. There are absolutely great resources. Home Repair Services, that is also our educational partner, they will do free home safety inspections for seniors. You just have to sign up. There are also excellent businesses that do it for a small charge that will do a top to bottom safety inspection that's primarily geared towards safety and aging in place. You also have the whole home inspection industry if you want just a top to bottom general home inspection. That is never a bad thing. People always think about that for people who are buying a home for the first time, but it's just as important if you've been in your home for a while to have somebody who's going to crawl on the roof, go in the attic, take pictures, give you a full report of that, of everything that's going on, including proactive suggestions of things that you can do in the future. So I know that in my own life, there's so many house-related items that, like I talked about before, I just don't need to know about because my husband does. So if that were to ever change, I'd really be pretty lost. And so what are some of the ways that single people, especially women that may not have been very involved previously in home maintenance items, can learn to do certain things on their own, especially if they find themselves single after a period of time?
Yeah, I think the internet is pretty amazing. I had a treadmill. I couldn't get to work last night. Went and bought $30 worth of parts, tested everything, voltmeter, all that kind of thing. And then somebody walked up and said, well, you have to have your hand on this thing or else it won't turn on. I'm like, oh, yeah, that's what I was checking next. And so I go to YouTube all the time. You Google it. I don't care if it's a water heater or a furnace, air conditioner, a stove. Like I can go to stoves that you don't have owner's manuals on. Like how do you set the convection oven? Like it's all in there. And I think that stuff's pretty cool to me. I use it all the time personally. Home Repair Services is someone I've been involved with also. You don't even have to, I always thought of it as an income-based service, but they have classes on Saturday mornings. I go there and learn how to do tile work and wiring electrical, maybe some advanced things, but I'll get into it in a little bit on another topic we'll talk about, but for me, the computer is my first go-to, but community-based stuff, I've seen community ed classes on how to do some of that things as well. So, but I like my YouTube, keeps me out of trouble.
Yeah, and even the idea of all of those manuals. So my mom turned 86 just 2 days ago. Happy birthday, Mom. She just walked in a little bit ago. And she said, so we went out and got her new phone. And we're there with her husband, who's 86 or 87 as well. I don't remember. And they said, well, where's the manual to the phone? And the guy laughed and says, you don't get a manual. They don't come with a manual anymore. So for all of you who felt, once upon a time I used to be super organized and I had files with every single, manual for everything in my house. Not that I ever looked at them, but just in case I needed them, they were there. And now, so often you don't even necessarily get that. And so this idea of being able to Google, well, how do I turn this on? How do I work this, this new thing that I've gotten? And it makes a big difference. So now, of course, it can be super empowering to learn many of the things that we want to do on our own for maintenance tasks. But there's also a lot of things that are simply not safe for a single homeowner to do themselves, or even for couples as they're beginning to age. So what is the best method for finding a reliable contractor, avoiding being scammed, and even safety measures that someone should take before inviting a stranger to come and do work in our home?
I've witnessed it at my parents' house. I went to school to learn how to build golf courses, and so I have a plant science degree, and we were sitting around my dad's pool one Saturday, and one of the lawn care guys comes and says, you've got all these problems in your yard, Mr. Lynch. You've got the dollar spot and red thread and all these things. I'm like, show me, and he couldn't show me, right? And then my dad will call me and he'll tell me that he's got hail damage. And I'm like, oh no, where? On my roof. Just your roof? What do you mean? I was like, well, hail doesn't discriminate. If you have hail damage, it's going to damage your car, and it's going to damage your siding. And there may be a few companies in town that pick 20-year-old neighborhoods and go in and knock on doors and say, hey, you've got hail damage and you can get a new roof. And then people end up mad at us when we send out an engineer and say your 10-year-old roof's in perfect shape and you don't have a claimable roof issue. And so nobody that comes door to door am I typically thinking I'm going to do business with. How many of you dealt with tornado damage last August, September? Anybody? So, I put tarps on 3 roofs personally. I live up in Belmont and watched it come through, and it was a mess. So, were you guys here for Jordan Bush? Did you guys see Jordan? He's an attorney that wore jeans, so I had my suit on this morning. I'm like, I better not, because I don't wear a suit ever. So, because I climb on roofs, I get in trouble for it. But if you have an insurance agent that's 1-800, like that's maybe a first step in the right direction, is maybe find someone local that's got their own rooftop. We know when we have claims, we have to be careful not to say use Cousin Eddie, because if it doesn't go good, they come back to us. But we know who does stuff good. We know who does stuff right. When it comes to restoration, like after water damage, there's a few companies in town, they rush in, tell you that the sky is falling, cut out all your wet drywall, throw it in a dumpster, and then 3 days later when your adjuster comes out and wants to take a moisture sample of your drywall and it's gone, they're like, well, we're not paying for all this drywall. We don't know if it was even damaged. And then that company comes and knocks on your door with a $20,000 bill saying you owe them money. I've seen it with tree companies too, right after storms. They come in, cut the tree up, move the stumps, get it off, and you think they're from the power company, you don't know. And next thing you know, you get a bill from a bully for 20 grand for tree work. So my first step is don't approve any work until you talk to an adjuster when it comes to the insurance world. But when it comes to just general help, I do all these little tricks. Like my daughter's car was up in Mount Pleasant. I don't really know who the good local guys are to fix cars cheap, because you go into some of these places and they want to sell you 4 new tires when you need a valve stem. And so I'll call the tow truck company and be like, hey, who's your favorite shop in town to do work on the side? And then they'll be like, oh, it's my buddy Joe down the street here. So sometimes I lean on hardware stores. I love to go to a hardware store. They usually tell me who's good. Supply houses, anything. Like if I go to Kendall Electric, say, hey, you got a small electrician that needs a little work that's decent and you trust. Like I like to go to those places, because if they say a name, they're not afraid to have the reputation on the line. the Better Business Bureau and stuff like that, sometimes people are paying for those reputations. So, we all get bad reviews. I probably got a couple on my page, and you can't help some people get mad at things, but I think third-party information is better than somebody telling you how great they are. I don't know, just the way I've always worked. But I definitely, me personally, the hardware stores, I think, if I'm in a new town, that's where I like to go. So.
Yeah, and just the idea of if you always recommend multiple quotes, that can always be a good thing. If you're having someone out to your house, especially if you're single, make sure there is someone there with you. So just have a friend, have a neighbor, even if it's not necessarily for safety, but simply a second set of ears. So that, because it's very easy for somebody to say something, and until it's in writing, and that's the other part, make sure whatever they're quoting is in writing. And if it's a job that's time and materials, find out an idea of how long they estimate that job is going to take. And I know from working on many, many houses that, stuff happens, and whatever the job is, it usually takes both double the time and double the cost. So it's not always that the contractor is not a great contractor. There's just other things that go into play. So as long as it's somebody that you find that you truly trust the person and their work, that's, to me, one of the most important things that you can do. And definitely the idea of third party, finding someone your friend used, finding somebody someone else in your family used and was happy with them, in addition to just the Google reviews, the Better Business Bureau. I know I'm part of that, but people don't realize, businesses, we pay to be part of that often. And there's so many things these days, advertising that is essentially pay to play, pay to be the expert. So just understand that sometimes people who look like the expert simply are the expert because they had the biggest checkbook to write themselves there. So be aware of that.
And there's different tiers too. Like if I've got somebody that's got something that's maybe something claimable, but it's only $800 or $900, and they're like, oh shoot, we've got guys that are one man in a truck that can do stuff a little cheaper. That top rated Google, they're probably a good company, right? There's a reason they get traffic. So sometimes you get what you pay for.
Yeah. I always believe that you get what you pay for. But sometimes it is that difference of you've got an excellent company that's been in business a long time, but they're very expensive, and there might be somebody who is a one-man show who's going to do a great job, as long as you don't mind waiting a couple weeks for them to be available and knowing that they're going to take a little longer to do the job. So for each job, and sometimes when I'm working with clients and I'm helping get quotes, we'll get quotes from a couple different places, and hey, we can have somebody like McDonald Plumbing who's excellent come in and they can get it done with their crew in a week for $2,000, or you can wait a few weeks and Sam can get it done in a month for $900. So it's based on your goals and what's most important.
Never go with the guy who says I can start tomorrow. That's my 5-star tip of the day. He says he's available. I'm like, I know.
Yeah, these days, most people, whether it's in real estate, insurance, or anything else, if they have an open schedule, there's a reason for that. So how about some of the key house items that tend to cause the most insurance claims, which we kind of started with those, but what can be proactively done to prevent some of these water, roof issues, sump pump, etc.?
Yeah, I had a house that someone I know purchased a couple years ago, and I was with the inspector, followed him around, everything checked out. 3 weeks later, the basement's got 2 inches of water in it because there's a 2-inch hole next to the furnace where the condensation drain goes in, and it backed up. There was no sump pump in that house. You would never have thought to have done anything. City water, it was a PFAS neighborhood, so they just redone a bunch of things. But at the road, tree roots had gotten in. So I think for me, I do it personally. Even if I had a septic system that was put in backwards, and it was a '05 house. They built them a little fast then. And my buddies tease me because I think I bought Kellemeyer Plumbing 3 trucks up in Rockford, and with the money I spent trying to figure it out. But paying that money for, it depends on where you live. If you live in a cornfield, you might not have to get your septic or your drain lines or sewer lines cleaned out. Like they've got a machine that goes through and spins and it takes tree roots and things. If you've got a 100-year-old maple tree in your backyard, that's probably something that's $200-300 a year, and just put it behind you, because the damage it can cause is far more expensive than that. So again, I'm the guy that likes putting a little Drano down my sink every quarter. The laundry tubs, we see a lot of damage from those. There's a lot of lint, the dryer vents, right? That's, if we do have fires, it seems like if it's not in the kitchen, it's from the dryer vents not being maintained. Checking outside the house where it meets the cold air that collects on those fins. So, but like I said earlier, water and roof is my biggest thing. So I have a gentleman I know that does inspection. He does a full-blown home inspection for like $400 or $500, but he'll do kind of a drive-by for a couple $100. So if you're not sure about something, a few $100s every couple of years to have him get in the attic and him on the roof. So I'll explain it in one of our future topics here, but the things that happen fast are easy to spot and easy to fix, but the stuff that happens slowly are sometimes where problems pop up and cause bigger, more expensive things.
Yeah, that's huge. So that kind of brings us to our next question. So some of the most frustrating things that we can face as homeowners is when we have a problem and we find that for some reason it's not covered by insurance. So can you talk about the types of home mishaps that are and aren't covered by insurance? What would be considered a catastrophe or deferred maintenance? And more importantly, how can we make sure that we have the proper coverage in the first place if we do have a problem?
Yeah, it's head of claims for the whole company. We're a Michigan-based company, so head of claims for the whole state of Michigan. His name's Roger Graff. I know him personally. He used to referee IHL hockey. I had a soccer team with a bunch of ex-IHL players on it, so we laugh and tell jokes. But if we're having a bad day, I can call the head of my whole company and say, hey, what can we do here? Insurance is pretty black and white, but there's some gray in there. It depends on how you interpret policy language. So there's kind of 3 layers to insurance. One was the policy purchased at what you expected. Apparel is a loss. So if you look at the front of your insurance declaration page, it'll say broad, basic, special perils. A special peril is any loss. A broad peril is a list of 16 things, like fire, lightning, vandalism, theft, explosion, weight of snow. My son Ian Lynch is not a broad peril. So he's a special peril. He's any loss. So if my kid throws a football and damages something, if I don't have special perils purchased on my home policy, that's not going to be picked up. So, and I don't think that's what Laura intended me to talk about in this topic, but people come to me all the time. The insurance industry is on its heels right now because of COVID. We paid $50 for 2x4s. State Farm pulled out of Florida, California. Farmers pulled out of Florida. Citizens is flying drones over neighborhoods, and if there's even a shadow of a tree branch, they're canceling policies. So, like the national carriers, even Farm Bureau, we've had to make some changes. So they're really paying attention to things these days, and so guess what happens when you go through 2 years of COVID and $50 2x4s and rental cars that are extended for a year? The rates go up, right? So I've seen double-digit rate increases, and we're only in Michigan, so we've got our butts kicked, but not as bad, and so people are shopping. So you got to be careful when you shop around and make sure that you got something that's similar. Basic perils is fire, water, and a couple other things, and we see that on rental properties, but I've come across people that live in $800,000 homes in Forest Hills that have basic peril coverage, and they saved $1,000. My dad saved $1,000 with his old agent. I said, Dad, you don't save money with insurance. You just reduce coverages, right? Or you increase your deductibles, right? So just, if you're ever out shopping insurance, be careful and make sure you've got the right coverages as far as the basics. But as far as people get mad because they're like, well, it wasn't covered, right? And so insurance is designed to happen to fix things that happen fast. So if my kid drives the lawnmower through the front door, covered, right? Car hits your house, covered, right? Roof crashes in, covered. But if you had a roof leak next to your chimney for 10 years and that part collapsed, and then it takes out the next 2 floors, we'll cover the next 2 floors, but the part that you should have maintained, they might pick on you a little bit. So there's a lot of homes being purchased right now that aren't getting inspections done. And I mentioned the roofing companies knocking on doors saying you could get a new roof. Did I just get cut off? Mine? No. So, well, they say I talk too much. So, but there's right. So there's a lot of focus right now on roofing in insurance, and so you got to really pay attention to what you're buying. I get a lot of people buying their first home. Right now the market's tough, so they're buying in areas that aren't as nice, going to fix it up, and 30 days later they're calling me going, my roof leaks and things like that. So we're not an extended warranty. We don't mow your lawn. We don't cut your trees down for you. We don't maintain your roof. So those kind of losses, sometimes people get upset about because they don't understand what insurance is designed to do. So we all report to the same higher powers, all insurance carriers do. All the language and policies is pretty much the same. There's a few add-on coverages, and the biggest one for me, everybody always thinks it's sump coverage, but it's sump and drain coverage. Some companies offer standard coverage. We do for like $2,500. Well, if you've got $50,000 worth of bamboo flooring in your basement, that's probably not going to get you to the finish line. So sump and drain, from 1998 to 2018, most high efficiency furnaces have a little white PVC tube that goes down to the floor and drops into 2 1/4 or 2.5 inch PVC. That's where any water damage I've ever had in any of my homes comes from. It's not from the sump pump sitting over in the corner. And so that's where the tree roots and stuff like that come into play. But for me, if you have a finished basement, go check your coverage for sump and drain, because even if you don't even have a sump pump, you've got probably a chance that you've got that kind of water comes up slow. So if you had a broken pipe in the 3rd floor and you've got a $500,000 house, chances are you're going to have $500,000 worth of coverage for a broken pipe upstairs if it floods your basement. But flood water, any groundwater that comes in, that's a flood policy. It's pretty rare that most people have that, but that sump coverage, it's sump and drain, so that's probably our biggest gap in coverage where people get upset. And then tree coverage. You can get an enhanced tree policy or enhanced coverage for really all ornament, shrub, and tree. And most standard policies, if it doesn't hit anything of value, there's no coverage. My buddy lives on Grand Haven Golf Club. He had 25 maple trees fall down in a windstorm, and it didn't hit anything, so he had to clean up 25 maple trees. So if it just touches the gutter, if it comes across the driveway, most companies will clean it up and get it off of the item, but they won't remove it. So you can enhance coverage for trees to have it taken away. There's still limitations, and people get upset. Like, I've mostly lived in cornfields, and I don't have trees, so the insurance industry is not going to treat you nicer because you decided to build under a bunch of 100-year-old oak trees. So just know that there's a chance there you could have some gaps.
Yeah, so let's talk about that, because in Michigan we do have a lot of storms and a lot of tree issues, and I often get into situations where there are disputes among neighbors because the tree issue really came from the neighbor's tree. And talk a little bit about how that works in terms of who pays for those.
Yeah, turns out I was my first client, and I used to own 2 boats, and one boat saved the other boat in 2014 from a windstorm, and my boat was at a storage unit. The tree came from the neighboring property, and it crushed my old boat and saved my new boat, I was like, all right. And so I'm like, well, somebody's writing me a check, and my claims adjuster was like, yeah, you are. You're like, it's your boat. You insure your own stuff. And so if you've got neighbors with big loomy trees and you don't like them and you've talked to them and they're like, I'm not cutting them down, and you just don't know where to go next, we usually recommend attorneys serve in a letter to say, hey, we're uncomfortable with this tree. But if you don't take it to a legal level, we have some people. I don't want to get into the Hatfields and McCoy of trees, but there's people that love their trees and some people don't. There's property line rules where you can go up, but usually those don't make for an invite to the 4th of July picnic. But it's your responsibility to repair, even if it's your neighbor's tree. Like my little sister, actually, her neighbor's an attorney friend of mine, and she's like, yeah, I just put up a new fence from your sister's tree. I said, did you get any money out of her? She's like, no. And really there was no money to get because it was her fence that was damaged, even though it was my sister's tree. So we insure our own stuff. It's kind of like the no-fault auto insurance. We don't worry about the other guy, but that usually is a fun topic.
Yeah, so if the neighbor's tree falls on your house, we're responsible.
Yeah.
Our insurance is responsible.
Unless
So-
we've deemed that tree a neglectful situation where somebody said, hey, you need to cut this tree down, and it wasn't done, lack of, just bad luck doesn't constitute that person's responsible for that damage, even though it's their tree. So
Yeah, never fun. So just things to look out, certainly in the real estate realm. The tree roots thing has been a huge, thing that I've come across in many homes. It's something that you don't always think about. Also, if you're in the city of Grand Rapids or a lot of the older homes, lead pipes that may have gone from the house to the street that you just may not know of. And sometimes there are programs with the city that they will pay for a portion of that to be replaced or even all of it in certain areas. So there are certainly things that can help you with some of these costs, but the key is to be proactive and not reactive in hopefully spending less money to fix those things. So